Hi, this is the Cat's Library. I'll be your librarian today. I planned for this video to have multiple natural disasters as dragons, but decided I'd rather draw one dragon really well than multiple rushed, or multiple over the course of a month. I chose to draw volcanic eruption as a dragon this time around. Engage speed paint! I started by drawing a base that I could draw on top of so that the multiple dragons I was totally going to go through with making would have similar proportions to each other. Part of the way through sketching out the design, I decided that the dragon should probably have different proportions, but still figured that the base sketch would be helpful for compositional purposes. I did not look up references until later on in the process, and so he is a bit more mountain colored than lava colored. I wanted him to have hair so that he would have a smoke-like element in his design. However, since he only had hair on his head, it looked out of place. I didn't want to compromise on the spikes, and so I gave him ram's horns and added back in his nose spike that I couldn't make work before instead of the hair. I later realized that I'd made a reference to mountain goats, which worked for me. Elsewhere on the reference sheet, I added a wing separate from the body because I couldn't get the wings to look right without covering part of the body in the sketch. In hindsight, I could have just had one wing since I drew two legs. I really like this wing that I did draw though. In the initial sketch pass of the full character sheet, I tried to draw the dragon's paw, but it kept looking like a hand, and so I decided to put an eye there instead. A paw would have had more variation among different dragons, but this is fine too. I drew a head-on shot of the dragon's head. I realized that I gave him mammalian cat-like eyes that were therefore front-facing in the headshot, but sideways-facing eyes in the profile. I kept it like that because I was thinking of this more of a wobbly, sketchy art style. I was sort of trying to channel the How to Train Your Dragons books, but while writing the script, this just looks like how I usually draw. The other reason was that even seeing the whole eye isn't very visible, and trying to draw a profile eye would make it even smaller. The eyes would have been best as a neon blue, so that they could really stand out, but volcanoes don't have neon blue, or so I told myself, so that wouldn't make sense with the prompt. Mostly analogous color schemes are difficult to pull off. Finally, I drew the dragon in his human form. This was nearly exclusively for when I was going to draw multiple dragons potentially to tell a story about them, which I may or may not have done later in this video. I didn't know what to do with this video up until the very end of the process. A lot of lore have dragons turning into humans, and so I thought I wanted to include that. And also I wanted to practice drawing cartoon people and different types of outfits to what I usually do. I forgot that I don't know how to draw short and curly hair. I was trying to have the curls in the same shape as the ram's horns. After the character sheet was done, I gathered a collage of references on screen and then scribbled some thumbnails for the final illustration. In the future, I'll make the thumbnails a bit more detailed because I couldn't decide on one to go forward with. I showed these thumbnails that I had to my sister, explained what she was looking at, and she chose number 4 because it looked, quote, cute, like it was hugging the mountain, end quote. And so that was the one that I went with. I didn't know what to talk about while the illustration was playing. I decided that I'd come up with some lore for a bit here, and then later on explain the drawing. In the ancient times, there were contradicting records about whether dragons and humans were friends. It was probably mostly tense, but with variations of friendly to antagonistic given the region. Both humans and dragons were and are complicated. Dragons could use their powers over natural disasters to stop them from happening or intentionally cause them to happen. That all changed with one specific event that occurred at just the wrong time. I'm going to say that it was the 1600s since that's when the East India Company made it to Australia, and that should probably make the world interconnected enough that this would set a preset, but long enough ago that other parts of the lore will make sense. When dragons are children, they are small, and they usually have small magical abilities. They learn to control their powers while the powers escalate. However, every once in a while there is a dragon child whose powers progress much more quickly than they are able to control. Usually, the dragon's parents and communities could help them prevent unintended damage. This is a source of wild speculation among certain members of the dragon community of where the parents were in this particular situation. So this teenage dragon accidentally caused a natural disaster that killed hundreds of humans. The humans in this country executed him without any regards for the circumstances. They knew that he didn't mean to cause mass devastation and killed him on the principle that he was inherently dangerous, and the dragons of the time did not like that. There was a bit of a war that overtook the whole world with very few unaffected areas. Dragons might have lost that original war. Slowly, the dragons decided to live among humans in human form so that they could raise their children in peace with knowledge of the enemy. In the modern day, most people are pretty chill. Every once in a while, a dragon attack will cause massive damage, and a wave of humans will try to suss out the dragons living in the population for demographic purposes. Totally not to punish people for being dragons, because that would be super illegal and unconstitutional, and would harm half-dragons who were lied to about their heritage. Even dragons who don't have anything against humans won't register as dragons in a legal sense. The exception is if they don't have a dragon doctor in their area and they need to give the human doctor notice of their specific needs. There are some outliers who are weird, or they had human relatives who made them do it. To be fair, a lot of dragons have gone public. It's just pretty much universally decided that they don't mark down unofficial documents unless absolutely necessary. This Volcano guy is an 18-year-old dragon who was going off to college for the first time. He doesn't really tell people that he's a dragon unless it comes up. He's not proud of it, he's not ashamed either, it's just part of who he is. And he doesn't want to deal with people's preconceptions about what dragons are. It's not his job to be an activist. If I make more videos in the series, I'll probably make a character who is proudly a dragon and who very much wants to advocate for everyone's rights, and she'll probably fight with this guy all the time for the contrast. He looks like he'd be named Francis. I also drew him with a pretty chill expression, which is the basis for why he'd be more chill about life. I think he is usually really calm, but on rare occasion figuratively explodes over something. His parents were very proud of being dragons and talked a lot about allowing the human population to flourish so that more of them could die when the revolution comes. They never hurt anybody and were nothing but loving to Francis, so he liked to tell himself those were jokes. His parents set him up with a club with other dragons when he went off to college. He resolved to go on the first day and enjoyed hanging out with the other people in the group more than he expected. There's probably a human classmate girl that he has a crush on and has gone on a few dates with, and that he has internal and external conflict about how to tell her that he's really a dragon. He was mildly precocious and accidentally started a volcanic eruption when he was 10 or something, but his parents stopped it before their house could get wrecked. There weren't any negative consequences because the humans didn't really notice because it was such a small beginning of an eruption, but he lived with the responsibility of that, and it made him more of a somber and cautious person. I think that this lore is good enough for basically making it up on the spot. I did put a lot of thought into it, sort of took a day of writing for it. So here's the play-by-play of the drawing that you should be about halfway through watching. First up, I took that composition thumbnail that I talked about earlier and made it fill up the canvas. I loosely sketched over it with a red pencil brush. I might need to work on how I sketch out clouds. I did move two of the legs to a more comfortable looking position. I changed the sketch to blue when I was done with it and put a more refined sketch that I took my time with on top of it. This was the final sketch that I used as the base to paint off of. I distorted the sketch a bit so that the pose was more diagonal than horizontal. I spent time painting the sky and clouds. I decided that I liked the dark clouds from one of the reference images, but knew that the dragon and mountain were going to be mostly darker themselves, and so I tried to tweak the clouds to be more of a lighter mid-tone. I also made them a bit more saturated than they probably should be because I have a problem. I should probably figure out how to draw in grayscale and then put the colors on top of it. I next turned my attention to the mountain. I didn't have any reference images that were a close-up of a mountain, and so I just made stuff up because I didn't want to go find a reference and try to fit it into my reference layer that I laid out so aesthetically. In hindsight, I probably could have put that reference on its own layer. The mountain ended up looking too soft and squishy since I was so focused on showing the different rocks. I tried to fix it by putting in shading that covered a broader surface area and took out some of the rim light. I put a lot of lava over it to try to cover it up. There was a bit where it looked pretty good, and then I did some subtle tweaks that made it worse, but I didn't notice and just thought that the lava was great. I went back and tried to make the rocks look sharper and more dimensional. Then I tried to tweak the lava to be more glowy. I accidentally took out too much of the dark tones, and so there wasn't enough contrast to be properly glowy since you need contrast for glow. I moved on to coloring the dragon since that was what I assumed to be the funnest aspect to the painting, and I was right about that. It was pretty simple. I put in the gradients of flat colors and then shaded and highlighted him with 4 layers. A broader soft shading layer and then a darker hard shading layer, and then a similar thing with the highlights. However, this looked too shiny and cartoony, and so I moved on to the one step that I don't really know how to do because no one really explains it. First up, I put a layer over one of the wings that I decided was farther away, like there was a bit of smoke between the wing and the body. The lava was very close to the color and values of the dragon, and so I tried to make it a bit lighter and then a bit darker. I played with the saturation of the dragon since he was looking pretty pale compared to everything else in the image. In its own way, this did make him stand out, but I'm more used to the subject being the most saturated part of the image, and so I changed it. At first I overdid it and then had to dial back. Earlier on in the process, I tried to give him dark crocodile-like spikes on his head, but the angle was wrong, and they were distracting, and so I took them off. I used a pencil brush to add grooves to his nasal horn, and variation in the scales, and some red underlighting from the lava. I made the spines and claws brighter so that they'd stand out from the background, and inadvertently made them look metallic, which I wasn't mad at. I put a bit more contrast to the eyes since they were blending in a bit too much. I just realized that I may have made them smaller than in the character sheet. I worked a bit more around the mountain and the background smoke. I put shading over the lava and tried to make the clouds less solid. Then I tried very hard to make the underlighting from the lava work with the very deep shadows and highlights that were admittedly a bit too dark. It didn't work. I can't remember if I completely took it off the final image or made it look very faint. I played around by putting some green gradients over the top and then got a bright blue low opacity brush and added in some smoke. The piece was veering a bit too warm at that point, so I wanted some cooler accent colors. I further messed around with the layering of the mountain and clouds. I put some more shading specifically on the face so that it stand out more. I tried and failed multiple times to put an oil paint filter over the image as a final touch, but couldn't figure it out, even after Googling it and looking up videos on how to do it. In the end, I drew some beige blobs and put a noise filter over it and then copied it. One of these I made a multiplier equivalent layer, and the other I put on a lighting layer, and I messed with both of them until it looked like paper. I am not sure if I like that effect or not. Overall, I like this painting though. I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. You can leave any questions in the comment section. I'm a bit shy, so I might not answer them, but you can still ask. We're cool. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue an established series or try something new for the next video. I decided that I wanted to draw a rattlesnake for the next realistic animal studies video, but I have been drawing a bunch of reptiles recently. There was the python, then there was this guy. I had an idea for a dinosaur who was in the same universe as the cheetah. However, my idea of a replacement for the rattlesnake was a roadrunner, and I'm not sure if that would work since the bird videos haven't been doing as well. People know what a roadrunner is though, so it might actually be better than the rattlesnake. So my questions are, firstly, established series or another new video series for the next video. And secondly, when I get back to the animal studies, Roadrunner or Rattlesnake. I'll see you when I see you. Bye!